Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Undermining the Israeli government. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu leveled that charge at Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer after Schumer called for new leadership in Israel.
Schumer claimed that Netanyahu is an obstacle to peace who bows to the demands of right-wing extremists. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
Speaking from the Senate floor Thursday, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has lost his way and called for a change in Israel's government.
By allowing his political survival to take the precedence over the best interests of Israel. The Netanyahu coalition no longer fits the needs of Israel after October 7th. The world has changed radically since then.
Schumer's speech comes as a growing number of Democrats are urging the Biden administration to step up public pressure on Israel to halt its war on Hamas. Schumer charges Netanyahu's coalition consists of far-right extremists who have been too willing to tolerate the toll of the war on civilians in Gaza.
Israel cannot survive if it becomes a pariah.
Netanyahu responded in a statement saying, Israel expects Schumer to refrain from undermining the Israeli government. Israel's ambassador to the U.S., Michael Herzog, wrote on X, Israel is a sovereign democracy. It is unhelpful, all the more so as Israel is at war against the genocidal terror organization Hamas, to comment on the political scene of a Democratic ally. Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said, we are an independent nation, not a banana republic. Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid criticized Netanyahu, calling Schumer's speech proof that one by one, Netanyahu is losing Israel's biggest supporters in the U.S. Schumer's speech is especially surprising because of his past support for Netanyahu. In 2015, he was one of a few Democrats who voted against President Barack Obama's Iran deal and didn't speak out against Netanyahu for his speech to Congress criticizing the deal. Moments after Schumer spoke, congressional Republican leaders slammed his comments.
It's just plain wrong for an American leader to play such a divisive role in Israeli politics while our closest ally in the region is in an existential battle for its very survival.
The Jewish state of Israel deserves an ally that acts like one. Israel is not a colony of America whose leaders serve at the pleasure of the party in power in Washington.
Senator Lindsey Graham called it earth-shattering bad and said to Schumer, you've done a lot of damage, my friend, and you need to fix this. In a more measured tone, Democratic Senator Ben Cardin said, as allies and friends, we must support the Israeli people in their efforts to shape their own destiny and chart the course of their post-war nation. In the meantime, the military campaign to defeat Hamas hinges on Israel entering Rafah, the last stronghold of the terrorist group in Gaza. Despite enormous pressure from the U.S. and other nations, Netanyahu pledges Israel will go on.
I will continue to repel the pressures and we will enter Rafah. We will complete the elimination of the remaining Hamas battalions and we will restore security and bring absolute victory to the people of Israel and the state of Israel.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, David Friedman is the former U.S. ambassador to Israel. He joins us now from Jerusalem. So, Ambassador, tell us your reaction. What's your reaction to all of this?
Well, Gordon, thanks, and it's great to be with you. Look, I think this was a very dark day, maybe a historically dark day in the history of the relationship between the United States and Israel. It was a gut punch that Schumer leveled against Israel. Look, Benjamin Netanyahu is a political figure, and there'll be an election, one of these days, and he'll win or he'll lose, or maybe he won't run. That's all down the road. Right now, the people of Israel are standing with Benjamin Netanyahu because he's their leader in a time of war, and Schumer knows that. And to try to divide Israel, at this time when they're facing this existential battle where they're on the cusp of finally defeating this implacable foe in Hamas, as I think I agree with Lindsey Graham. I mean, Schumer did an enormous amount of damage. And you know what the crazy thing is, They want a ceasefire. They want a hostage deal. What Schumer did made it very unlikely that they will get either, because as Hamas sees America moving away from Israel, Hamas has no reason to compromise. They think they're going to win this war. And that's a terrible signal that Schumer sent to the into the Middle East.
Well, that's my main complaint against it, is that if you're on the other side, if you're the terrorist sitting in a tunnel, you literally are saying, all I have to do now is wait. And if I wait long enough, I'm going to win.
Yeah, I mean, the point that Schumer made is, if Israel doesn't follow America's military directives, America is going to abandon Israel. America is going to use its leverage, its treasury, its money, its weaponry. It's going to withhold all that from Israel until Israel, cows to the sovereign. That's what the Schumer is saying. And so this is music to Hamas's ears. And by the way, it ought to terrify everybody, because if Hamas, is not eliminated, if Hamas survives this war intact, even with a couple of battalions, that's a template for terrorists all around the world to commit atrocities, to take hostages, and then to bargain for victory as the United States, softens on fighting. You saw yesterday that, we just gave another $10 billion to Iran. In the middle of this war, we're funding Iran with massive amounts of money. The policies here are maddening, and I just wish we could turn this around.
Well, it seems like history is repeating again and again here, that, there's these outbursts of terrorist attacks, and then suddenly everybody wants to start talking peace and forcing Israel into a peace settlement, peace negotiations. It just seems to be a reward for terrorism.
Not just to a peace negotiation, but to unilaterally impose upon Israel a Palestinian state. I mean, can you imagine? You have 80% of the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria that celebrated the October 7th attacks. Don't just support them, but celebrated them. And now, as the outcome, we're going to give these people a platform to continue their efforts to destroy Israel. I mean, it's completely upside down. And I think, one other point, which I think people need to understand, Netanyahu really does have the support of the Israeli people as a war leader. Whether they like him as a politician or not, this is not going to weaken Netanyahu. This is going to weaken America. It's actually going to do exactly the opposite of what Schumer is trying to accomplish.
Well, I liken Netanyahu to Winston Churchill. He was the prime minister in wartime, and then after the war, they voted him out. So, we'll see what happens. I'm not making any predictions here. I do want to talk about what you just said about 80%, because I think a lot of people don't get this. I'm going to quote the Palestinian Center for Policy Survey and Research. They put out a survey December 13th, 23. Now, I hear that the Palestinian Center is actually, they're not cooking the books. They're not making up numbers like the Ministry of Health in Gaza, but they are saying 52% of Gazans, this is after October 7th, 85% of West Bank respondents, so this would be 72% of Palestinians overall, are voicing satisfaction with how Hamas is conducting the war, satisfaction with October 7th. Do you think anyone in the current administration understands they're actually rejoicing over October 7th and they want Hamas to lead them?
Yeah, I think they may know that, but I don't think they care. I think what they care about are, 100,000 voters in Dearborn, Michigan, or maybe in Minnesota or someplace else that in a tough swing state have the capacity to alter the outcome of the election. That's all this is about. None of this is about getting to the right outcome in Israel. The right outcome in Israel, I think everybody would have to agree that has a working brain, is to defeat Hamas. If you don't defeat Hamas, they're going to come back. They've said they'll come back and slaughter Jews. So, I mean, that's the right outcome. After that, we can talk about how to rebuild and how to restructure, but you have to defeat them after this war. That's not what Biden and Schumer are talking about. What they're talking about is finding a way to thread a needle. On the one hand, they say, we love Israel, and maybe that placates the democratic Jewish voters, who support Israel. On the other hand, they say we're going to cut off the resources for Netanyahu, and somehow that's going to placate the far, left woke, Palestinian Arab communities throughout the country that are small in number, but do have in certain swing states some real influence. So they're trying to play it both ways. My prediction is they're offending everybody, and that Trump's going to win in a landslide. But that's we won't know that for 9 months. But right now, what Schumer and Biden are doing is all about politics. They couldn't care less about what the outcome will be in Israel. That's not their concern right now.
Were you surprised that it was Schumer that did this?
It was so disappointing, because look, I grew up in New York. I've known him for a very long time. I've always considered him to be a political animal. They say the most dangerous place in the world is between Chuck Schumer and a camera. So I've always known that politics was his god, if you will. But I didn't know that he would go this far. I mean, to undermine Israel at a time of war when they're fighting for their lives is an absolute low point in the relationship between the United States Senate and the state of Israel. And he's parroting the Biden as well. He cleared this with Biden before he gave the speech. So it's deeply troubling and disappointing. And I think ultimately there'll be a price that he has to pay. I think people will ultimately reject what he's done, and I don't think history will be kind to Chuck Schumer.
Let's talk about Benny Gantz and his visit to Washington. Do you think that had any role to play in this? He's obviously popular in Israel today, but I was surprised he went to Washington, D.C. It didn't make sense in a time of war to do it. Any influence from that trip?
No, I mean, look, I know him well, and I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that he thought the relationship was going sideways and he thought maybe he could help. He clearly didn't help. And I think the reason he didn't help is because the Schumer-Biden crowd wasn't interested in repairing the relationship. What they were interested in doing was in punishing Netanyahu and using that for political purposes. So even if Benny Gantz went there with good intentions, and I'm willing to assume he did, his efforts failed because they didn't resonate with the Democratic leadership that's looking simply to placate their Palestinian, far left radical base.
Final question. Any advice for the Christian community here in the United States and around the world, what to do at this point in time to help Israel?
Well, look, I think the Christian community in America is they're large, deeply faithful, incredible friends of Israel, and of course, I would say first, of course, they should pray for Israel. But on top of that, look, the Christians have political clout in this country that Jews don't, and to the extent that the message can come from the Christian community that we support the state of Israel, we stand with Israel. We're committed to Israel's survival. We're committed to Israel defeating its enemies. We don't wish harm on anyone, but Israel has to win this war and defeat these evil forces. I think it goes a long way, and obviously we have right now in our government people that are not of that mind.
All right, we will keep standing with Israel. Ambassador David Friedman, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. God bless you.